What's up, guys? How's everybody on this beautiful Saturday? Everybody having a good Saturday so far? Got my buddy Barney here with me. Actually, I'm going to turn this light off. Yeah, that's a little better. Not quite so bright. Did another sneak attack on you guys today. Guitar collector, how you doing? How you doing? What's happening? Figured it'd be a good day to, hey Vinny. Yeah, back on the attack again. Ibanez, what's up? How you doing? Yeah, I did a video yesterday on the guitars and sound of the Balance tour, and got some things wrapped up today, and kind of figured we'd do a video on the guitars and sounds, more or less the guitars, but a little bit about the sound, on the 1984 and the 5150 tour. So got a whole bunch of guitars here we're going to look at here in a few minutes, and let a few people jump in here and we'll get into it. Should be kind of a fun chat. Yeah. So how's everybody doing? Everybody having a good weekend so far? I'm not. My girlfriend dumped me last night, so oh well. After a year, here we go again. So single again. I'm single again. So I guess that's a cool thing. Time to have some fun. But anyways, don't forget about what Eddie Van Halen guitar picks he used on the 5150 tour. Absolutely. I actually got a couple stuck on one of my guitars to show you guys. So yeah, we'll talk about that. But just like I said, just give it a couple minutes and we'll get rolling here. But should be kind of a fun chat. We'll go for about an hour, and you know, if you guys got any questions or anything like that, we'll jump right into it. What are your favorite Eddie tones from the Roth and Haggard eras? Well, honestly, Ibanez, if you watched the video yesterday, I did on the Balance sound. The Balance sound is my absolute favorite tone from all Van Halen. Really, I love that sound. My favorite tone from Haggard era would obviously be Balance. I also liked the 5150 OU812 sound, but pretty much the Balance sound the most. From the Roth era, I was a big fan of the Fair Warning sound. That was really cool. The sounds kind of progressed. While we're waiting for a few people to jump in here, we'll just go into this and then we'll jump right into the video. Hey Frank, Faraz, how you doing? I'm doing great. Well, other than getting dumped by my girlfriend last night, and it was a little rough last night and this morning after a 3-year relationship, but oh, whatever. It is what it is. So, so I'm kind of, you know, hey, it is what it is. So I'm gonna be single again. So time to, you know, time to move on. But yeah. So basically, it would be, you know, if you go back to the first album, we talked a little bit about this in my video yesterday. If you go back to the first album, VH1. They didn't really have a lot of control over their sound. You know, they were pretty much doing what they were told they had to do for the sound, and they had that kind of a, you know, kind of a slapback type sound. Like if you listen to "Ain't Talking About Love," you know, when they're doing the dun 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 dun, it's dun 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 dun. It's a quick slapback sound kind of that they had back then. And Eddie always said he didn't like that sound. But if you get into the Van Halen 2 album, it changed a little bit, and then Women and Children First was a little bit more raw, a little bit, you know, heavier sound. Like Eddie was kind of getting on his own then as far as the sound. He was, you know, like the first chords of Everybody Wants Some, you could kind of hear that grunge, you know, that part coming in. And then Fair Warning changed, real raw, still had the Brown sound. Diver Down, a little bit different. A little more chorusy. 1984, kind of the same thing, and then obviously 5150. We'll start there. You know, actually we'll start in 1984 in a few minutes, but yeah, there is lots of fish in the sea. It just kind of sucks when you put everything you got into one of them, and 3 years down the road, you know, it doesn't work out. But whatever, it's kind of stupid, but it's all good. It's all good. Life goes on. So, but anyways, all right. I guess we can get rolling. So. Again, I didn't know I was going to do this video today, but I figured no better time than the present. to knock out another video. I had some time this weekend. So if you guys haven't seen it, check out my channel yesterday's video. That would be Rob's EVH Guitars TV. I got a whole ton of videos up there that I've done in the last, maybe 4 or 5 months, whatever, when I started doing these on my own. And we're going through a whole bunch of cool stuff. I hope you guys like it. But the one I did yesterday was on the balance guitars and the balance tones. And so we talked about the Music Mans, we talked about the P.V. Wolfgangs when he swapped over. I'm not really going in any particular order because I just think it's kind of more fun to kind of bounce around, but we will hit all the eras, I promise. So today I figured we'd knock out the 1984 and 5150 tour era. I mean, we could probably throw OU812 in there, maybe we will, because there really wasn't that much change in guitars from 5150 to OU812. So maybe we can throw that in there too, maybe we'll do that. But we are going to be doing a show on the Fair Warning tour. I'm just waiting for Nick Amendolara, the kid, to finish painting my body. He's repainting my body. So I'm going to wait on that one for the Fair Warning one, so the Franken Strat can kind of, the red, white, and black version can have its debut, so to speak, and then, we'll go over all that. We'll do a Diver Down one. And actually, we'll do like a 1978, 79. We'll talk about the Shark, the Frankies, and all that stuff. Women and children first, everything. So we'll keep cranking on it, and we'll just go right through it. But I'll kind of jump around a little bit, kind of keep it interesting. So, but check out the one yesterday. Wish the production could have been a little better on some of the album that did impact the sound of. Yeah, Ivan, as you're talking about balance, or are you talking about 1984 5150? Oh, I'm sorry, on some of the albums, yes, I agree with it. The one that comes right to mind for me is OU812. That comes right to mind for me because that that sound is just, there's no bass in it, there's no bass at all. It's just, it just has nothing to it, But, there's something burning in here. Hang on one second, guys. Oh, that's my neighbor. He's got his grill going. I think he just cleaned it, so. But anyways, so yeah, I agree the production could have been a little bit better. But, all right, let's jump in. Balance was pretty much perfection. Yeah, I agree. Balance was just huge. And that's why I like the sound, because it's such a big, huge sound, But anyways, the year is 1984. And we'll actually back up just a little bit. So I don't have this particular picture handy, but I do have it. But about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years, a picture surfaced. And it was a picture backstage at the US Festival in 1983. And there's a picture of Roth and Eddie there with his striped jumpsuit, his striped overalls, and he's got his Franken Strat. But all of a sudden, you see this guitar in the background, and everybody's like, whoa! I recognize that guitar. It's the 5150 guitar. And it makes sense because Paul Unkert built the neck and cut the body for that guitar, but he didn't paint that guitar because that guitar was painted in '83, beginning of '83, and Paul had left Kramer in '82. So Paul and George Felice did most of the Frankenstein's type, guitars, but then Paul left in '82, so a lot of the other guitars George took over. So the 5150 was painted probably by George Felice or Zeke Clark or someone in the Kramer group. We don't know, but it wasn't by Paul Unkert. But he did cut the neck and the body, so we do know that. But we see this picture, and we're like, whoa. The 5150 was actually at the US Festival, and Eddie had it there. He never played it, but it was backstage. So he was just getting kind of phasing out of the Franken Strat then and moving into the 5150. That was kind of his thing. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So US Festival, Eddie had already, the 5150 was done. It was complete. It was painted. And so was the 1984 Kramer. I don't know if that was there too, not sure. But the 5150 and the 1984, and I believe the Hot for Teacher, those three Kramers were painted at the same time, those particular three. And we're going to get into those guitars, you know, pretty exclusively here in a minute. So that's 1983. 1984 rolls around. The band starts recording 1984, and there's some skepticism and there's some debate on if the album was recorded on the 5150 or the Franken Strat. I've read articles where Eddie says that he recorded the album on the Franken Strat, but then retired it for the tour and did the tour obviously with the 5150. And then I've read a little bit where he says he used the 5150 on recording of 1984. I would say probably mostly the 5150, because Eddie at that point had just like wanted to kind of retire the Frankie, and he was doing this new thing with Kramer. He'd kind of run its course with these, you know, these guitars that had the, you know, the cut off pick guards and the three pickups, the single coils and the humbucker. He kind of ran its course with that. He was kind of went back to a Bumblebee type thing, where you know, a rear-loaded guitar, not a top-loaded, you know, front-loaded, a rear-loaded guitar with one pickup, no pick guard. You know, he started doing that back in those days. Even in Fair Warning, he was doing that. You know, so he kind of went back to that and kind of retired that Franken Strat type cut-off pick guard, three pickup, you know, Frankie kind of mess, so to speak. So my guess is he did most of the recording with the 5150, and certainly some other guitars. Hot for Teacher, I think, was done on a Gibson Flying V, I've heard, things like that. But so anyways, we get into the 5150 tour, okay? And the beginning of the 1984 tour. So we get into the 1984 tour, okay? Now the beginning of the tour, Eddie's rig was, he was using Marshalls, he was using two Roland Echo units for his delay. Chris Hubbard told me a few minutes ago what the actual models were. I think they were 2700s or something like that. But whatever, there was two Roland delays, which I think he still uses those today, or used them right up until the end. But he was using the Marshall. He was using that old 69 Plexi. That was still his sound. He was in the Marshall phase still. No 5150s had been developed or anything like that. I think he was, you know, tooling around with different types of amps, but I don't think he was, you know, he certainly wasn't using them live. So he was in the Marshall phase. A little bit more chorus in his sound. He was starting to come back with the chorus, and the echo had changed a little bit. But the 1984 tour, if you listen to it, his guitar tone live anyways was very clean. If you listen to Eddie's solo spots and some of the bootlegs that are out there, sometimes it almost sounds like he's playing clean. You know, there's not a lot of heavy distortion. There really isn't. A little bit on the album, but his sound was very clean. It wasn't quite as dirty. And then 5150, he dirties it up again a little bit, and then, you know, continues to go. But as we said, you know, yesterday, Eddie's always changing his tastes with his tones. So the main guitars of the 1984 tour. All right. Well, here's one, the 5150. Now this was probably 1983, early 84 picture. And obviously you can tell it doesn't have the space tape on it yet. And it doesn't have the stars in the headstock, and also probably not the star in here, because he hadn't put the space tape on yet. And the 1984 Kramer, which we'll go over in a minute, also didn't have the space tape or the stars on it. And you can tell, you know, all the same hardware's on there. Original whale tail bridge, probably a Duncan JB or a 59. I'm thinking it's a JB sound. You know, MXR knob. You notice he had the strap lock eye hook up here. He hadn't swapped it around the back yet. Pretty much the same, you know, the Gaudo tuners, you know, vintage nut and string trees and all the crazy stuff that we all search for our replicas. So that was the 5150, pretty much hot off the press, and it became Eddie's main guitar. Now, if you go into this book, like I said, it kind of shows some cool pictures, and we'll talk about the other guitars Eddie was using. And again, here's some pictures of Eddie during the 1984 tour. Okay, and you'll notice again he's playing his guitar with no space tape on it. It's pretty new. It's got a couple little cigarette burns and stuff in it, but it hadn't really been overly relicked yet. Here he is using the guitar with the tray table on it, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's the little guitar, the little Dave Pecholat guitar that he got back in '83 for little guitars. He was still using that in 1984. So the 5150 was one of his main guitars. So let's talk for a second about the building process of those first three guitars, the Kramer 5150, the 1984, and the Hot for Teacher, which we're going to show you my replicas here, which are pretty accurate. All right, so the all right, it's okay, bud. So the 5150 and the 84 and the Hot for Teacher, like we said, were built and painted about the same time. Now, there's some rumors out there that the 1984 was going to be Ed's main guitar. That was going to be his main player. And then sometime towards the beginning of the tour, he started to fall in love with the 5150 guitar. I'm not positive on that, just a couple rumors I've heard, which could be very possible because, quite frankly, these two guitars were the 5150 and the 1984 were his babies, and the striping patterns pretty similar. The Hot for Teacher is a little bit different. We'll talk about that in a minute. Again, we don't know if he, my guess is the 5150 was probably his main player because that was the one that we saw backstage at the Yus Festival. But the 5150 and the 1984 guitars were his main players. Everything was on that 5150 now. His recording, his live, he just fell in love with it. He loved the neck. I think he really liked the paint job. I mean, obviously you guys know this is my 5150. It's probably one of the most accurate replicas out there. Hubbard did it, and I'm not saying that because I'm being cocky. I'm saying that because it's the best one I've ever seen, and I've been painting and building these things for 25 years. This thing is just insane, down to every little bit of wood grain. I mean, you just name it. The thing is just incredible. But I've done a video on this specific guitar. But I think Eddie, the striping pattern is very interesting. It almost looks like a spider web all coming together in this general area here. So Eddie fell in love with this guitar. Now this is a current day version of what the 5150 looks like. Obviously it wasn't nearly as relic as that. It had a different pickup in it, stuff like that. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But that 5150 and the 1984 towards the beginning of the tour were his main players. Okay, let's just see who we got in here real quick. The 1984 Montreal Show, you can hear so much nuances of Eddie's picking, one of my favorite tones. Yeah, I agree, Faraz. Yeah, again, like I said a minute ago, it's very clean sound in the 84 tour, especially solo spots, very clean. Clayton James Hicks, how you doing, buddy? Yes, today is Straturday, yep. Johnny Bean, my man's here. What's happening? Happy Straturday, Johnny. So yeah, we're going through the 1984 and 5150 guitars, so it should be kind of fun. So the 5150 guitar and the 84 guitar were his main guitars. Now before we jump into a couple of the other ones that he played on tour, let's talk about space tape. So obviously going off of those pictures early in the tour, Eddie hadn't put the space tape on. Okay, now the space tape is the numbers, the red reflective numbers with the black outlining and the stars. Sometime towards the first quarter of the tour, towards the middle of the tour, is when we started to see the 5150 decals get put on, okay? And we don't necessarily know when he did that, but we do know it was sometimes, like I said, towards the beginning of the tour, okay? Now, I'm trying to look for a couple of pictures, which I don't have, which is fine. Handy anyways. The interesting thing is when you see pictures of the 5150 guitar without the 5150 space tape and the stars, it looks relatively clean, okay? And again, this guitar was getting hammered. I mean, literally pounded and used every night and probably thrown on the table and whatever, dropped on the floor. I got a video I'll show you guys in a couple of minutes of Eddie actually throwing the guitar to his tech and it fell on the floor. It's kind of an interesting one, but actually I think I showed that in my 5150 guitar thing, but maybe we can look at it again. And then all of a sudden, halfway through the tour, so you see the numbers on, now you're starting to see a little bit of relicking coming. You're starting to see some checking in the paint jobs. You're starting to see a little bit of wear here, not much, a little bit of wear. Now, why did that happen? Well, obviously because that's where Eddie's elbow was rubbing on, okay? And the reason it started to kind of wear like that was because of the grain that goes through the wood. And you'll see this one has been replicated pretty good. It's very grainy. It kind of circles down around here. And that's something that none of us really saw years ago until the high-res pictures started coming out. And on the back of the guitar, you started to see a little bit of wear here. Not nearly this much, because like I said, this is present day. But, so, Eddie's playing this guitar. And it's his main guitar. All right? And he's also playing the 1984 guitar. Now, I can't tell you, other than one song, what he used on this one. I think Eddie brought this 1984 guitar out towards the end of the set, and if you watch the Lost Weekend with Kurt Jeffries, who's a friend of ours, Johnny and I and Dave, and we've actually had him on Johnny's shows before, and got a chance to interview him. Great guy, Kurt Jeffries, the winner of the Lost Weekend. It's a cool video. He talked a lot about these guitars. But if you watch that video, I believe they play Ain't Talking About Love at the end of that show in Detroit, because that's where it was, and Eddie's using this 1984 guitar. Now at the time, it had chrome hardware on it, okay? And it had a different neck, which we're going to talk about in a minute. This was the neck that Eddie put on the 5150 tour. It had chrome hardware here. But it was a different neck, but basically the same exact guitar. And it started to relic a little bit too, but not nearly as much as the 5150. So jumping back into the 5150, excuse me, the 1984 tour. I keep saying 5150, so please excuse me. I got a picture here, which you guys have probably seen. A really cool pic, which is online. Here's a pic of Ed and Val. Doesn't want to focus, of course. Ed and Val backstage. Now, gosh, it's too bad it's so bright. Val is holding the 1984 Kramer. You can tell. I'm sorry, guys. It's so bright. But Val is holding the 1984 Kramer, and Eddie's holding the 5150. All right. Now, the 1984 Kramer, even though you can't see it, it's got a gold Floyd Rose on it, which is an original whale tail, same exact one on Eddie's guitar. And it's got a neck on it with a 5150 type pattern, but the black stripes going backwards, and it has 2 stars on it. And it also had 2 stars underneath the neck, underneath the horn. So a lot of you guys will see that the 84 has 2 stars in here. Johnny Bean, did you put your stars that I gave you on your 84 yet? So I had 2 stars here, and it had 2 stars on the headstock. It was a different neck, which I have a version of that in a second. I'm going to show you. The significance of the stars, because Eddie had 1 star on the headstock of his 5150, and for some reason he would throw 1 star in here. The significance of the star is to identify what his main player was and what his second player was. And Eddie said that in an interview with Val at the 1985 Hard Rock Cafe when he dedicated a guitar, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. So that was the significance of the 2 stars. So the guitar tech would see the headstock with 1 star, grab it, that's Eddie's 5150. 2 stars, oh, that's the 1984, that's the second one. It was just a real quick identifier so they could determine which guitar was which. So as far as striped Kramers backstage during the 1984 tour, there's not any pictures, as far as I'm aware, of backstage guitars. There's a lot of them on the 5150 tour and OU812 tour, but I have not seen Eddie's guitar rack from the 1984 tour. However, we do know that the Kramer 5150, the 1984, and the Hot for Teacher were there. There's some videos, there's some pictures of backstage where Eddie shows the 5150 and the 84, or excuse me, the 5150 and the 84 and the Hot for Teacher, but no pictures of the whole rack of all of his backup guitars, so I don't know how many he had. He may have had the Franken Strat there, but I don't think so, because I think he'd retired it by then. But maybe he had a couple of other, you know, Kramers. I'm sure he did. Eddie would usually go on the road with at least 5. But it's kind of unbeknownst to any of us what other Kramers he had, you know. All right, let's just see what we got here. R2, R3, what's happening? Joey's. What's going on, Joe Easy? Johnny's doing 3 hours tonight. Nice, yeah, Faraz. Keep watching that Johnny Bean show. It's awesome. And their Saturday night shows are awesome. Rob, got a question. On my Musicraft Kramer 5150, the jack is a barrel type and the nut keeps getting loose. Is there something I can do about it? Yeah, there is. Yeah. Show you my 1984. Yeah, it's a barrel jack, which is that era 5150. Eddie switched it out to a plate later. But it's a barrel jack like this, right? So it starts getting loose. So what you want to do for Oz is take your back plate off, and inside, it's kind of tricky, but you want to get like a pair of pliers in there. There's a little nut, and all you got to do is tighten that nut from the inside, and what that'll do is that'll cinch that barrel jack up and the nut on both sides of the wood here. That's all that is. If it's a little loose, there's a nut inside here. Just try to get a grip on it with, like I said, a pair of pliers, needle nose, or something like that. They're a little tricky, but if you can just tighten that little nut, it'll cinch this up nice. Because I have that happen to my guitars quite frequently. So, all right. What else we got? Hey Janice, how we doing? Guitar collector. Eddie loved drinking Heineken. Yeah, he did. Especially, yeah, Heineken was his big beer back then, especially backstage at the Hard Rock Cafe with Val. Okay, so we know that he played the 5150 for most of the tour, most of the shows, and he would break out the 1984 sporadically because he loved that guitar too. Usually it was towards the end of the shows. Like on the Fair Warning tour, Eddie would play the Frankie, and then at the end for Unchained, he'd break out the Circles guitar or the Rude Weird Shapes. I'm going to do a show on the Fair Warning guitars real soon, and we'll talk about that. But a guitar that actually made a presentation in the Van Halen camp back in 1982 and 83 were the mini Les Pauls that he used to record little guitars on. And this is my version of it. These guitars, this is not a Dave Petchalot one, but the story goes that backstage on one of the Fair Warning tour shows, towards the end of the tour, a gentleman by the name of Dave Petchalot, who's still alive today and still makes these, believe it or not. Chris Hubbard and I found them on Facebook. They're expensive, but they're pretty cool. I'd love to have one day, but it's kind of a waste to get, spend that kind of money on a guitar that's only going to play one song on. This one does it just fine. But he approached Eddie backstage and said, I got these guitars I want to show you. And he presented him with 2 of these mini Les Pauls, 2 pickups with just 2 knobs, small scale obviously, 3/4 guitar, and presented Eddie with them, and he really liked them. So when they were on the road during the end of the Fair Warning tour, as the story goes, is when Eddie recorded, or wrote, I should say, little guitars. All right, and then he played it during Diver Down and everything. Now he had 2 of these guitars. He had he had one that looked kind of like this, a red one, and then he had I don't know if the picture up there on the wall. You can see it right there. It's kind of bright, but that's it's like a regular sunbursty type color. So he had 2 of them, and I don't remember if it was this one or that one he liked better. One of them had a little bit thicker of a body. All right, and they had this one doesn't have, but it had a little speaker in the back, which Eddie never used because he just plugged it in, and ran it through his amps. But he would tune it down. It's got a special tuning, and that's how, which I don't know if this is tuned up, and that's how he recorded little guitars. Yeah, it's not even tuned up, but so really cool guitar. One of them had a VH sticker on the headstock like this. All right. And yeah, pretty cool. Now this was a Lotus guitar when I got it about 10 years ago when I transformed it into a little guitar. It actually had 4 knobs. I filled 2 of the holes, put some different knobs on. I just recently painted it red because I thought that was pretty cool. Swapped out the pickups because it had regular style pickups, so I put these soapbox pickups in. Didn't have a pick guard, so I cut the pick guard myself, got a little piece of metal, painted it black, and tried to make that look good. It had regular dot inlays, so these are stickers from Japan that I bought for $15. They're block ivory inlay stickers, and they actually look good and they stay on well. Stripped the headstock down, sanded it down, painted it black, and stuck a VH logo on there. And this is what the guitar used to look like on the back. I haven't painted the back yet. I just painted the top because the sides are red kind of too, so it's kind of neat. And then put the eye bolts in. And I'll tell you, it's a great little guitar, and it does the trick. It plays little guitars awesome. I play it once in a while. So Eddie was playing this guitar for little guitars, and pretty much that's all you see when you look at 1984 pictures from that tour. You see Eddie playing the 5150, the 1984, the little guitar for little guitars, and once in a while, I've never seen video of it, but there are pictures. Once in a while, you'll see this guitar be broken out. Hot for Teacher, all right? The Hot for Teacher guitar, which was painted by Paul Unkert, as we know. It was, as far as we know, the last, guitar that was painted for Eddie by Paul, all right? The Hot for Teacher. And this is a pretty accurate replica. It's all worn. Now, the guitar wasn't, again, as relic as this is back in the 1984 tour. Most of it started having a little bit of wear here from pick scratch and stuff, but not nearly this much. Whoever owned this guitar after Ed gave it away, he gave it away to someone, and it's in a private collector's hands now. A lot of the relicking happened to it. There's some really cool pictures of this guitar out there, and did a lot of research to replicate this version of it. But so those were the main guitars, and that's all Eddie played live as far as we know, unless something happened and he needed to use a backup Kramer. But I don't know what other backup Kramers he had backstage. There's no pictures, just of these, the 5150, 84, this one, and the little guitar. Those four guitars are the only ones I know. Hellface, yes. Eddie's little guitar had a little speaker in the back. If you get the Guitar Aficionado magazine from 2012 or 13, I think it is, it shows a picture of the front and back of that guitar with Eddie on it. Did an interview with Eddie's guitars. Had a little speaker in the back. Actually, since you asked, I think I actually have that magazine right here. Oh, you're in luck. Here it is. Of course I have it. Why wouldn't I have that? So, let's see. I'm not going to get too much into this stuff because this is kind of off topic. But yeah, there's Eddie's little guitar. This is one of them. This is the Sunburst one. Okay? And I think this is the one that was a little thicker. It had a little speaker in the back. Kind of cool, And actually says, this is Eddie talking, we were on tour in Nashville, 1981, I think, and this guy showed up at the back gate, Dave Petchola, and says, I got to show this to Eddie. The crew let the guy in. I thought that the guitar was pretty cool. It has a speaker in the back of it, but it sounds like shit. I ended up writing little guitars on that guitar, and I used it to play the song live. Later, I had him make me another one with a fatter body, but the thinner original one that I got from him was a better guitar. Okay, so he liked the thinner one a little better. Oh, I'm sorry, I was backwards on that. But yeah, the gentleman was Dave Petchola, and that was the little guitar. Pretty cool. All right. Johnny Bean, I'll talk to you later, buddy. Have fun at the studio and then the beach. Say hi to Howie for me. Yeah, okay. All right, then we'll move on. So, 1984 tour wraps up. All right, those were the guitars of 1984. Now we're into 1985, and Eddie is kind of wondering what's going on with the band. Roth is just about ready to leave the band. Matter of fact, if you watch the video footage from the 85 Hard Rock show where Ed and Val were being interviewed by, I think it was, I don't know, was it Lisa Robinson? I can't remember who it was, doesn't matter. And Eddie had a particular guitar that he was going to donate to the Hard Rock Cafe, and this was what it was. It was this guitar. Oh, look at that. 2 stars on the headstock, right? We'll get into that in a second. So Eddie's writing all kinds of music. Obviously, he had come up with Good Enough, Summer Nights. He was working on different things like that, and Roth was kind of off on sabbatical. He was doing his California Girls thing, and Crazy from the Heat thing, and whatever. And eventually, he left the band. That's pretty much what happened, and then we know the story. Hagar came in, 5150 tour, which we'll jump into. Before we jump into that, let's just talk about 1985 for a second and what happened to a couple of these guitars. Well, Eddie was still loving that 5150. It was his main guitar, and he could not put the thing down. He was constantly playing it. I have all kinds of pictures from 1985 with Eddie holding that guitar, playing it, and just just going nuts with the thing. It was his favorite guitar. One thing I want to say real quick, I just want to show you guys this real quick. I forgot to talk about it. Again, you can't really see it. Oh, there you go. In the 84 tour, one thing Eddie had done to his 5150 guitar is he was doing that thing where he wanted to play the guitar like a piano. He was doing that thing where he wanted to play it like a piano. So he had what's called a tray table set up, and that's what the holes in the back of the 5150 were. All right, and it was a little tray table that he could just fold out, and then it would lock in, and then the guitar would rest up against his body like this, so he could play the guitar like a piano. That's what that was for. And he had two of them. He had a plexiglass one and a wood one. And he ended up taking them off just because it was probably really clumsy and cumbersome on the guitar. And you never saw him put those back on the guitar. But he had one on the Franken Strat, and he had one on his 5150, and that's what the holes are. And I believe he had one on the Hot for Teacher, although I've never seen footage of him using it, because the Hot for Teacher has holes in the back of it too. All right. So he had one on his main guitar, his 84 guitar. I don't know. Possibly, but I have not seen any pictures up close to the back of it. I have pictures of the back of it, but nothing up close to show the holes. But definitely on the 5150 in the Hot for Teacher, he had the tray table set up. And then he kind of just didn't bother with that anymore. He still did the same thing, but he would break that table out during a solo, and that's when you'd hear it. 1985 comes, and Eddie's main guitar, like we said, is the 5150, and he just can't put it down. And I would say probably the 1984 guitar was a close second, because that guitar was still right there in his arsenal. Now the Hot for Teacher, at some point after the 1984 tour, and I don't know when, this guitar was given away by Eddie to somebody. And this guitar, like I said, so before we just put this down, it got a ton of relicking over the years. It's pretty accurate. It was all like weathered here, and just like somebody literally dragged it through the pavement. But it's a pretty accurate rendition of what the Hot for Teacher looks like today. Big chunk of wood taken out here. He had the springs backwards in this one. Holes for the tray table. All right. The serial number on this guitar was actually 0. Hold on, I gotta see here. It was actually 0717178, I believe. And so this was the Hot for Teacher. One of the only guitars that had, one of the only ones that had a striped back of the headstock. All right. And it had Schaller tuners, and somebody put these weird looking nut clamps on there with screws. I don't know who did it, but I did that to mine to make it look accurate. And somebody also used some of the intonation screws here. They put them with some gold and chrome Phillips head screws instead of the Allen ones, so a whole bunch of different stuff. This is a real old Floyd. It's all worn up, so chipped a little bit, which is really cool because it makes it look awesome. Like we said here, a whole bunch of pick scratches and whatever. But most of this stuff happened to the guitar after Eddie gave it away. But that was pretty much the end of the Hot for Teacher guitar. Really cool guitar, and it's still out there too. So, Eddie decides that he's going to donate in 1985 one of his guitars to the Hard Rock Cafe. All right, and if you watch the video, it's kind of interesting, and most people don't know this. I've known this for many years only because I've studied these headstocks and everything. But a lot of people don't know this unless you really pay attention to his main guitars. So, I showed you a picture a few minutes ago of the 1984 guitar, right? During the 1984 tour. Chrome Whaletail Floyd Burroughs bridge, right? I think it had a different kind of knob on it too at the time. Doesn't really matter. We'll talk about what it is. This is what it looks like today. But it didn't have this neck on. This is like a 5150 style neck, right? With black nut and string retainer. Didn't have this neck on. It had this neck on during the 1984 tour. 2 stars, right? Remember, that's how they identified his second in command guitar. 5150 was number 1. This is 2. Kramer logo and a backwards black stripe. In other words, it goes the opposite way. But the pattern of the stripes, the white stripes, is the same. But it's on this guitar. What's this? This kind of looks like the Hot for Teacher. Well, this is a guitar that George Felice probably painted, right? It's a Kramer guitar. It's one of his patterns with the seagulls and everything. And it's called the Hard Rock 85 Giveaway Guitar. So, Eddie says in that interview, he said, when they said, why did you give him one of your guitars? He goes, well, I wanted to give him one that I played, so I gave him my second favorite guitar, which technically, second favorite guitar was the 1984. And he goes, I wanted to give him one that I played, so I gave him my second favorite. And the girl goes, well, what are you going to play now? He goes, playing my favorite one, which is his 5150, right? So his second favorite guitar was this, right? 1984. So Eddie never gave him the second favorite guitar. He stripped the neck off of it, put it on this body that he didn't want anymore, all right? Strung it up and gave it to him. So he's half right. He's half right. He never played this guitar live. Never played it live. But it's got the same stuff, 1 volume knob. It's a Beretta body with a slanted pickup, you know, Beretta route, and original Floyd Rose. But he took this neck off because he said, well, I'll at least give him the neck that I played for one tour. So he's kind of right. And this guitar, to this day, okay, is in the 85 Hard Rock. And again, that's not something a lot of people know about. And here it is right here. So here's the guitar, right? Again, it's so glary, I'm sorry. And there's Ed and Val holding it. I don't know if you can see. You probably, maybe you can see the stars, but yeah, they're right there. So that was the guitar that was donated, and it had the original 1984 tour 2-starred backwards black stripe headstock. So it was kind of his second in command guitar, but not really, because he never played this live, but he did play the neck live. So this is the guitar that still is out there today. Really, really cool. So I decided I was going to make a replica of the 85 Hard Rock. It's got some, you know, some road or some relicing, I guess, but you can tell it's not real relicing because it's not worn down the wood, it's just white. So what they used to do back in those days when they painted these Kramers is Eddie never liked them to look factory. They were all done with rattle cans, maybe a little bit of a spray gun, like, you know, air spray. But after they were done, Eddie wanted them literally dragged through the parking lot a little bit. He didn't like it looking factory. So Paul Unkrich told me face to face when we had dinner with him one night. He said we used to take chains and like sheetrock screws and just throw them at the body and bounce them off, take it out and skip it across the pavement a little bit. That's what they used to do. So this was the 85 Hard Rock guitar. All right. So Roth leaves the band. Sammy Hagar comes in, and they start recording 5150. All right. So let's start with the first song that we heard on the 5150 album, Good Enough. All right. Well, guess what? Eddie's favorite guitar, the 5150, was still his favorite guitar. Now it was really road worn because it's, you know, just relicing and he's sweating all over it. He's been playing the thing nonstop since the 1984 tour to the 5150 tour, which is a couple of years. But they recorded Good Enough. And the song Good Enough was recorded on the 1984 Kramer. All right. It was also, well, let me rephrase that. It was played live on the 1984 Kramer. I would assume it was recorded on that too, but maybe not, I don't know. But it was played live through the whole tour with a 1984 Kramer. The only difference was now the 1984 Kramer had a black Floyd Rose on it. At the time, then 1986, had a speed knob on it, not a Steinberger knob like it does today. It had a speed knob on it, and it had this new neck, all right, which looked just like the 5150 with a black string retainer and a black nut, all right. New neck, same type of a stripe job, Schaller or Godot tuners, we don't know. I mean, the 5150 were Godot's. I think the 84 was Godot too, but I got Schallers on mine. But they're 90-degree tabs, so it's close enough on this one. And everything else was the same. Now, the back of the 1984, this is the exact stripe job. We found this out about 10 years ago when a Japanese magazine came out. The serial number for it is B4186. That's the serial number of the 1984 guitar, which is, I have this replicated. And in here it says Z 1984, and we believe that means Zeke Clark. Maybe I would imagine Zeke was probably one of the ones that painted this. So that's why it says Z 1984. I believe that, okay? Because he was Eddie's tech back then, and he said he used to do some painting. But this is a pretty good replica. The overspray and everything, has been pretty much done. Hubbard did this again for me. I just got this in the other day. 1984 space tape, 2 stars, and really cool. But it had a different neck on it, and this is the neck that's still on it today. Okay, and this was swapped out, as we said, for the 1985 hard rock guitar, and that's the neck that was originally on this guitar for the 84 tour and when it was built. So this neck, like I said, it's basically a 5150 style neck, just without the star. Same type of paint job. So Eddie would play good enough on this guitar. And I don't have an A bass string on here right now, but Eddie would put a bass string on the in place of the low E and tune it to A. And when you listen to good enough, I'm not plugged in, but when he would play that, he was thumping on the low E, okay? And it was basically tuned to A. So he had his strings tuned A, D, G, B, E. Okay, because he was playing the standard tone now, because Sammy was in the band. So that's pretty much how he did it. All right. So that song was played for good enough. And I have a video of Eddie actually breaking a string on his 5150 guitar and actually playing the 84 for a few minutes until they restrang it, which I don't know how he must have just not used the low E because it was tuned to A. I'm not sure. But we're in the 5150 tour, and again, this is Eddie's main guitar, 5150 Kramer. This is the guitar. He did everything on this guitar. Eddie used a Kramer Farrington acoustic guitar, okay? Probably just like this one, for the intro to Dreams on the album. I don't think he brought this guitar on tour because he never played Dreams on the guitar. He always just had a guitar strapped on him, when he was on the keyboard. But if you listen to the album, he used the Kramer Farrington on the intro of the album. But getting back to the tour, Eddie had a new toy. And again, I've done a video on this. He had the Steinberger GL2T 1985 Newburgh-built trans-trem guitar. And this is exactly that. It's a 1985 Newburgh guitar, trans-trem, and it's really a cool guitar. And I love it. And I striped the faceplate myself maybe 15, 17 years ago. And it's one of my babies. Great guitar. Oh, thanks, Fender Guru. I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate it. David Ennis, what's going on? So this was his new toy, all right? And Eddie had actually started, well, I can't say exactly when, but there's pictures of Eddie in his studio in 1984 playing Steinberger guitars and a couple of Steinberger bass guitars, the headless guitars. They call them broomstick because they're like, they're like a broom, And Eddie had 2 of these GL2Ts delivered to him sometime in 84, I believe. Could have been 83, but I'm thinking 84 because he went right to town with it when he got off the '84 tour. And you see this guitar with his 5150 at the studio a lot. And that's before the faceplate was striped. He got two of them. There was two identical GL2Ts. And halfway through the 5150 tour, or a quarter of the way in, he striped the faceplate. Kind of like the 1984 and the 5150 guitar, just into the beginning of where he put the space tape on. Well, there's pictures of Eddie playing this guitar black with a black faceplate early in the 5150 tour. And Eddie, hadn't painted it yet. The guitar was actually, the faceplate was actually painted by a gentleman by the name of Jim O'Connor. Eddie didn't paint the faceplate on his. But it was painted sometime in the beginning of the 5150 tour. And then you always saw him playing the striped version for Summer Nights and Get Up. I'm trying to think with, I'd say it's about a quarter of the way into the tours when you saw this get painted, all right? Now, some of the picks that he was using were these. They had said 5150 on them. And they said on the back, these, I'm not going to pull them off because they'll never get them back on, but they say Edward Van Halen on the back, but the 5150 picks were like this. This is what Eddie, one of the main picks Eddie was using back in those days. So this was his new baby, and he played this on Summer Nights and Get Up. And it was just a really, really cool guitar. He loved the trans trem. It wasn't something he wanted to use exclusively because he still liked the Floyd Rose, but the trans trem was a really cool design for him. So Eddie was playing 5150, 1984 for Good Enough, Steinberger trans trem for Get Up and Summer Nights, and there was a fleet of striped 5150 style Kramers in his rack, because there's pictures of them, all right? They all look kind of the same. They all look kind of like a 5150, but they all had a pointy Kramer headstock like this, all right? They had maple necks with a pointy Kramer headstock. It's really hard to find Kramer maple pointy stick headstocks these days. Used to be hard to find hockey stick Kramer maple headstocks back when I got into doing this stuff. Then Musicraft came around and whatever, but still hard to find these ones unless you have it specifically made. But Eddie would have a fleet of guitars, and basically when he would play Why Can't This Be Love, Good Enough, Why Can't This Be Love, Love Walks In, or Dreams, those guitars, he would usually grab one of these, and this is one of them. This is the 918V Kramer, okay? It's one of the backup Kramers that Eddie was using in the 5150 tour. I painted this one myself about a year ago or so. But they all were like this. The 918V is, I chose to do the backup of this one because it's another space tape type guitar and it had some cool stuff on it, which we'll talk about in a minute. But basically in the set list of 5150, Eddie was tuned to standard. He was always tuned standard pitch on his 5150 guitar, all right? But for some reason, he would tune down a whole step for the song live, and I never understood why he did that. Now, on the album, it's tuned down a half step, all right? But live, he tuned down a whole step. And I just never really liked, I never liked the sound of that song tuned down a whole step. I actually like the sound of the song in standard the best. But it sounds good on the album, but that was only down a half step. So what would happen was, Eddie would play this guitar for like You Really Got Me, One Way to Rock, stuff like that, and then Summer Nights or whatever, Get Up, and then he'd go back to it for a song or so, and then Alex would come in and play the drum solo. Zeke would take the 5150 guitar, tune it down a half step, or excuse me, a whole step, and they would, after the drum solo, Eddie would play the song 5150 on this guitar, but it was tuned down a whole step. After the song 5150, I might be getting it a little mixed up here, but you get the point. This is basically what was happening. After the song 5150, they would go to a keyboard song like Dreams or Love Walks In or something like that. So Eddie would typically play the solo of that song and just abandon the keyboard for a minute, but do the keyboard, the whole song on the keyboard, and then when solo came, he'd grab the guitar. And because the keyboard songs were and standard pitch, there wasn't enough time to retune that 5150 guitar back to standard pitch because they went right into a keyboard song. So while they're playing the keyboard song, Zeke's back retuning the 5150 guitar back to standard pitch, and Edward's got one of the backup Kramers on his shoulders for the solo when he's done playing the keyboard song for that keyboard song. And then when they were done with the keyboard song, he'd get the 5150 back again, and it's tuned back to standard, and he's good to go. And that's pretty much how they rolled with that, and that's the little trick that they did. And I know that for a fact. That's how they did that. It just gave them time to retune that guitar back to standard pitch because they had to tune out a whole step for the song 5150. And that's the only tour they did that. Because in the OU812 tour, they played the song 5150 in standard pitch. And I think it sounds best that way. But Eddie had a fleet of these striped Kramers. And they all look pretty much alike except for the 1984. The 1984 Kramer was the one oddball because it had the different striping pattern. But it was still Eddie's pretty much second favorite, Kramer. Because he just liked that guitar. It was his good enough guitar, so he played it every night. But only for that one song we know, or sometimes if he'd break a string, he might break it out. But these backup Kramers were always used during the keyboard songs, okay? And possibly a couple of other times. And somewhere towards the middle or beginning of the 5150 tour, Edward put this little blue star, like kind of neon type blue star in 918V space tape. And back in the 80s, 84, 85, 86, this space tape was pretty readily available. Stuff you could get at the hardware store. It was for mailboxes. You can't find it anymore today. I mean, you can get it online, but it has to be specially made. The Van Halen store sells it. Obviously, EVH sells it for the 5150 guitars. But I've been getting this stuff for 20-something years, but I've always got it through my internal sources. But you got to kind of tweak it a little bit. But back in the day, it was pretty readily available. You could buy it like that. It came in just rolls of tape. I remember seeing kids putting this tape on their skateboards back when I was a little kid back in the 80s. And I might have even had some. I don't remember, but it was definitely out there. And then just like those reflectors on Eddie's guitar, they just kind of phase out, But I built this one because somewhere in the beginning of the 5150 tour, Eddie put this on 918V, and that is basically like 5150 an escape mental case, but 918V is a violent one, I think, and I think that's what the V stands for. It's a California police code for violent mental case, so we put 918V on there, and that's the significance of this guitar. But they were all Beretta bodies, so they had slanted pickups, and they all had Beretta cavities in the back. And like we said, they all had pointy headstocks. All the backups did. But other than that, they're pretty much the same. In the 5150 and the 1984 were Pacer special bodies with the different cavity in the back and the straight pickups in the front. Those were the Pacer style bodies. So those were the guitars of 5150. Let's see what we got for questions here. More paddle guitar. Yeah, they call them that. Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's get into, since we've pretty much covered that, we'll keep on trucking and we'll wrap this up in a few minutes. But let's talk about the OU812 tour, just since we're right here and there's no sense, you might as well talk about it because not a lot changed. So 1986, 1987, Sammy's in the band, the 5150 tour is over, they're recording, they're having a great time. It's like a new band because they just love Sammy and Sammy loved them. It was like a new beginning, everything was awesome. And they're doing all kinds of cool stuff. Sammy did his solo album. Eddie played bass on it. This is like a nice, close-knit family. And OU812 comes out, all right? And again, 5150, Eddie's main guitar. Still got the black JB pickup in it. Everything's pretty much the same. It had a barrel jack. It didn't have this plate in it at the time. But all the hardware was exactly the same, basically. The serial number on the 5150 guitar, and this is correct on mine too, is B4129. So for those of you replica guys, that's the serial number for those. You can have those specially made. and it had that whale tail bridge, the original whale tail bridge, which is, you know, this is the best, the most hardest to find, with a big steel block in the back, and that just gave that guitar just, you know, just incredible sound. And this one does too. I mean, it just rings out, you know. I'm gonna try that again. So that's what he was doing in the OU812 tour. So 5150 guitar. Steinberger GL2T, because they were still doing Summer Nights. Okay, so these were his main two guitars. There is a video on YouTube of Zeke Clark going through all of Eddie's guitars backstage, and he shows a little bit of the 5150, the 1984, and the Steinberger guitar. The 1984 guitar was on the 5150 tour. It was. Excuse me, was on the OU812 tour. However, I have never seen any footage of him playing this guitar on that tour. He very well might have, but remember, they weren't playing good enough on OU812. That was not on the set list anymore, unless it was just like something they threw in once in a while. I have a whole bunch of OU812 shows, and none of them have good enough in them. So I would imagine that he didn't use this guitar much. He might have taken the A bass string off and just put a regular E on and had it tuned standard again, like a normal guitar. I don't know. I would guess that some point he played it sometime, maybe backstage, but I've never seen any pictures or footage of him playing the 1984 Kramer during the OU812 tour. But I know he did have it, because there's, you know, it's obvious it was part of his rig. It was part of one of his backups. It was number 2 backup. But this was the main guitar he played. As a matter of fact, like in Live Without a Net, where Eddie broke a string and Live I Can't Play 55 on the 5150 tour, he played the Steinberger for the rest of it, and then during Ain't Talking About Love. I have two videos from the OU812 tour where Eddie breaks a string on the 5150 guitar and plays the Steinberger guitar, and one of them is for Ain't Talking About Love. One of them, it was right before a solo, and he plays a little bit of it on his solo on the 5150, on the Steinberger GL2T. But for some reason, it was the 5150 and the Steinberger were his main two for OU812. He did play a regular Fender Stratocaster for Finish What You Started, a regular Fender Sunburst Strat. Eddie had a couple of them. One of them he had 5150, you know, scribed in with a screwdriver into the body, and another one he had too. But so that was another guitar. But basically, those were the guitars of OU812. But the '84 guitar was in the arsenal, just wasn't used. And Eddie still had those backup 5150 guitars in OU812 too. He still had a fleet of them. Probably the 918V was still there, and some of the other ones that didn't have any space tape on them. But so pretty much the guitars from OU812 and 5150 pretty much stayed the same. It's the same type of guitars, except Eddie broke out a Fender Strat for Finish What You Started. And pretty much that's it. Those were the guitars of those tours. Jimmy Carr, what's going on? How you doing? So, and again, as far as Eddie's sound was concerned, Eddie was still using the Marshalls back in those days. Eddie was using the Marshalls for, since day one. So for 1984, 5150, OU812, he was using the Marshalls. The only thing that he did a little bit in OU812 is he boosted the harmonizer up a little bit. He was using a little bit more chorus. Like if you listen to Cabo Wabo, I think the song was recorded on a Steinberger 12-string guitar, and it said actually OU812 on. There's pictures of that guitar. I don't think he played that guitar live. He might have had it with him for the tour, but I never seen him play it live. But you can hear a lot of chorus in that album. Unfortunately, there's not much bass in that album because they kind of had Mike's bass was drowned out. But a really cool album. And those are the guitars and the sounds of those three tours. 84, 5150, OU812. Not a lot changed. You never really saw him use the little guitar anymore after 84 because it was Little Guitars was a Roth song and Hagar wasn't singing it. But Eddie pretty much kind of abandoned that little guitar for the Steinberger. The Steinberger was just infatuated with being able to lock that bar up and down and playing different keys, and that's something you couldn't do with that little guitar. You could, pretty much you're just basically limited to just whatever tuning you had on at the time, obviously. But Eddie was always playing around with different sounds and everything. Nick Horton, just jumped in a couple minutes ago. Oh, dude, you got to go back and watch this one. We just talked about 3 tours in the guitars of 84 tour, 5150 on OU812, and we went through a whole bunch of them, so you definitely got to check this one out. Before we wrap it up, let's just talk real briefly, and I already went through this, but we'll just talk a little bit about the 5150 guitar and what became of the 5150 guitar after the OU812 video, or the OU812 Japan video that we saw in the tour. So they finish up the tour OU812, I think in Japan, and you see this guitar all over the place. And then the last time we really saw the guitar, other than 2004, played live was in the Cabo Wabo opening in April of 1990. All right. So by that time, Eddie had started to sign the contract with Music Man. All right. And Music Man had this guitar, and they were going off of it because they replicated the necks on their guitars after this one. And at some point, again, the headstock broke on the 5150 guitar, broke right in half, and that's exactly where the headstock broke, where they attached that piece of wood. And you see that in my other video. This guitar neck was not in this shape when they cut it. It was actually a Strat neck that was turned into a Pacer beak neck, chicken hawk style, and then they cut it. They cut a piece off here, and they cut a piece off here, and they basically doweled and glued the wood. You can still see the tuner holes in here. Paul Unkert did that, and that's how Eddie liked these necks. So they were all custom made. So it pretty much broke right around the seam where it was glued onto. So what Eddie did is he actually moved the tuner down here, all right, to keep the pressure off that, and then he threw a Schaller double tab on the end just for looks, but it wasn't ever used. All right. So the headstock had been broken, 1990. Had another tuner added up here, but the original was brought down here, and the Kramer logo was covered up with a Music Man logo because Eddie was playing Music Man's. And the guitar really wasn't seen too much after that. There was a couple pictures of it from 1992. And then in 96, 95, 96, when Eddie went with Peavey, as far as we know, Eddie removed the Music Man logo, and that's what the scratch here is, because it's still gunk from the paper, and he had the Kramer logo was still there. But Eddie did a couple alterations to it. He threw a Peavey Wolfgang pickup in his Kramer 5150. He switched out the barrel jack to a plate style jack like this, which is actually better quality, believe it or not. Did some other things. He was moving the strap locks all over the place. That's why the back of the body looks like Swiss cheese. And he had we were talking about this last night. He started dipping his eye bolts in a rubber plasti dip, so the metal hook wouldn't be metal on metal and make that much noise. It kind of took down on the noise, but then again, when you use it, it wore it right off. So that's how the 5150 kind of became this here. Okay, he ripped the tape off here for the indicator. He had gaffer's tape here back in the 80s, and he ripped that off, which is what left the residue on there. As you can see, this is probably one of the most accurate guitars I've ever. This is the most accurate 5150 I've ever had. And the guitar just, had tons of relicking on it and everything. But that's pretty much how the 5150 became what it is today. So the last thing I'm going to say on this guitar is it's interesting that, all these years, why did Eddie put a Peavey Wolfgang pickup in this back in 96? Why would he have done that? He didn't do it to, as far as we know, any other guitars. That tells me that this was still one of his go-to guitars. And if you look at the studio now, there's some semi-recent pictures of the studio, and the 5150 is still hanging there. It looks just like this. So the 5150 guitar was still always close by because I think he loved that guitar, like he did the Franken Strat. And we talked about it yesterday too. The Amber Music Man is also still to this day close by, and it's right next to the 5150 almost, because that was one of Eddie's main favorite guitars. And his PV Wolfgang Sunburst guitar, standard that he played in '98 and 2004, it's got 5150 stickers on it now, silver ones, mailbox stickers. That's also one of his main guitars. Those seem to be his main ones. But anyways, getting back to that tour, that's kind of what we had for guitars and sound back in those tours, and pretty neat. I'm just going to show you guys one video because I wanted to show you guys this. This is a video of Eddie in the 5150 tour dropping the guitar and it's smashing on the floor. It's really cool. Just need to find it here. It should be pretty handy. Stand by. This is one you're definitely going to like. Now again, you guys can see this on one of my other videos, and I think it's the video on when I do on the 5150. But oh, come on, where are you? Where are you? Okay, hold on. Stand by. This is just really cool to see. It's fun to watch that this is how that guitar was treated back in those days. Of course, if I wasn't live here, you know, I'd find the video in like 0.2 seconds, but because I'm live, it's going to take me forever to find it. But I really would like to show you guys this video. Stand by. Talk amongst yourselves. Here it is. Okay. So this is in Montreal during the 5150 tour, and it's at the end of the set. And hopefully you can see this. But you'll see Eddie takes his guitar off and he goes to throw it to Zeke, and somehow the strap or something gets caught on him, and the guitar goes bang. Watch this. Here he goes. Whoops. Bang. Look at him. I just dropped my fucking guitar. Zeke comes over and picks up. Look at him. He's like, oh crap, dude, I just dropped my fucking Kramer. Now you wonder how the headstocks broke. That's not when the headstock broke, but when you treat your guitars like that, that's probably kind of how that's probably how that happened. So obviously on my replica, you know, we got the it's not a real break. It's a fake crack with an X-Acto knife, but it looks pretty cool. You know, definitely looks awesome. So anyways, let's just see what we got here, and then we'll call it. And for those of you that jumped in late, please go back and watch the beginning of the video, because I really hope there's some cool stuff that you guys will enjoy. This was a video on the guitars of the 1984 and 5150 and OU812 tours. And the last thing I'll say is these were pretty much, and the Steinberger, of course, were his main babies. The 5150 and the 1984s, these were the guitars of that era, and these were his main ones. All right. Frankie Jones, how you doing, man? So that's all I got. And anybody have any questions? If not, I'm going to let you guys go. And again, go back and rewind if you want to check it out. And I wish all of you guys a happy, fun-filled, safe weekend. Have a good time. Stay safe. Don't hurt yourselves. And I'll be doing another video here real soon. Again, we'll do some different videos too. We'll do some videos on fitness and martial arts and firearms and stuff like that if you guys want to see some cool stuff. But we'll certainly continue to go with the Van Halen stuff. I want to do another video where we actually play some riffs, and I'll take some requests on some riffs you want to look at. I didn't really do any playing today because I wanted to focus on guitars. But we will be doing another show soon on either the Fair Warning tour guitars or the Diver Down, and we're going to just jump all over the place. So we'll try to hit all the areas. So Frankie Jones, thank you, man. So listen, you guys, jump back, watch the video. And one thing I want to say too, a lot of you guys message me on YouTube with really good feedback, and I really appreciate that. If I don't get right back to you, or it takes me a few days, and in some cases if I don't get back to you, it's not because I don't care, it's just because I didn't catch it, or I was reading it, you know, at work or something, and I didn't have the time to log in or whatever. But I really appreciate it. I will try to get back to all you guys that I can, or at least like your comments. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad you guys enjoy it. Hopefully, you know, we'll continue to have some fun on here, and I really enjoy doing this for you guys. It's something that I enjoy. I love all these guitars. I love talking about them. I love learning about them still, and listening to what you guys have to say and showing them to you. So have a great weekend, guys. Thank you, and love all you guys, and thank you for all your support.